Fellow gardeners, let me share something that transformed my gardening game completely. After years of struggling with compacted soil, lackluster harvests, and constant watering, I discovered the secret weapon hiding right beneath our feet: earthworms and their favorite foods. Today, I'm diving deep into the world of worm-friendly mulches that will turn your raised beds and containers into thriving ecosystems where both plants and soil life flourish together. You see, I used to think mulch was just about keeping weeds down and retaining moisture. Boy, was I wrong. The right mulch doesn't just sit on top of your soil like a decorative blanket. It becomes a living, breathing buffet for earthworms that work tirelessly to improve your soil structure, drainage, and fertility. Let me walk you through everything I've learned about creating the perfect worm paradise in your garden. Before we jump into specific mulch types, let's appreciate what earthworms actually do for our gardens. These incredible creatures are like tiny soil engineers, consuming organic matter and transforming it into nutrient-rich castings that plants absolutely love. They create tunnels that improve drainage and aeration, and their constant movement helps break up compacted soil naturally. In raised beds and containers, this work becomes even more crucial. Unlike ground-level gardens where worms can migrate freely, our contained growing spaces rely on us to create the perfect environment. The mulch we choose becomes their primary food source and habitat, so making the right choice can mean the difference between thriving soil biology and a sterile growing medium. My absolute favorite worm-friendly mulch has to be shredded leaves, and here's why. Leaves are exactly what earthworms have been eating in forest floors for millions of years. They break down at the perfect rate, not too fast like grass clippings, not too slow like wood chips. When you shred them, you're creating the ideal texture that worms can easily process while still providing excellent coverage for your beds. I collect leaves every fall and run them through a mulching mower or leaf shredder. Oak, maple, and hickory leaves work beautifully, while avoiding black walnut, which can inhibit plant growth. The key is achieving pieces roughly 1 to 3 inches in size. Too small, and they'll mat down and create anaerobic conditions. Too large, and they take forever to break down. What I love most about shredded leaves is how they create a perfect microclimate. They retain moisture without becoming soggy, allow air circulation, and as they decompose, they feed beneficial microorganisms that worms depend on. I've watched my leaf-mulched beds transform from decent soil to rich, crumbly earth that feels alive in your hands. For container gardening, straw has become my go-to choice, especially for vegetable containers. Unlike hay, which contains seeds that will sprout everywhere, clean straw provides excellent worm habitat while staying relatively neat and manageable in confined spaces. Wheat straw works particularly well because it breaks down at a moderate pace and doesn't contain the allelopathic compounds found in some other grain straws. I've found that a 2 to 3 inch layer provides perfect coverage, and as the season progresses, you'll notice worms making tunnels throughout the straw layer, slowly incorporating it into the soil below. You know, the beauty of straw in containers is how it helps regulate soil temperature. During those hot summer days, it keeps roots cool and prevents rapid moisture loss. In cooler weather, it provides insulation that actually extends your growing season. Plus, earthworms absolutely thrive in the loose, airy structure that straw creates. Now, grass clippings require a bit more finesse, but when used correctly, they're just incredible for feeding earthworms quickly. The key is using them in thin layers and making sure they're from pesticide-free lawns. I never apply more than an inch of fresh clippings at once, and I always mix them with more carbon-rich materials like shredded leaves or straw. Fresh grass clippings are high in nitrogen and break down rapidly, which can create heat and anaerobic conditions if applied too thickly. However, when managed properly, they provide an immediate food source that gets worms active and reproducing quickly. Honestly, I often use grass clippings as a booster mixed into my primary mulch rather than as a standalone option. One technique I've perfected is creating layered mulch systems where I alternate thin layers of grass clippings with shredded leaves or straw. This creates a perfect carbon-to-nitrogen ratio that breaks down steadily while feeding worms consistently throughout the growing season. Aged wood chips deserve a place in every worm-friendly garden, but timing and type matter enormously. Fresh wood chips can actually rob nitrogen from your soil as they decompose, but chips that have aged for 6 months to a year become incredible worm habitat. I source my wood chips from local arborists who are happy to deliver them free. The key is getting a mix that includes some smaller branches and leaves, not just trunk wood. This diversity provides different decomposition rates and creates varied microhabitats that different earthworm species prefer. For raised beds, I use aged wood chips as a base layer, then top with faster decomposing materials like shredded leaves. This creates a long-lasting foundation that continues feeding worms and improving soil structure for years. In containers, I'm more selective, using smaller chip sizes and making sure they're well aged to avoid nitrogen tie-up in the limited soil volume. While technically not a traditional mulch, a thin layer of finished compost over your primary mulch creates an irresistible environment for earthworms. I like to think of it as setting out a welcome mat that says, "Earthworms live here." The microorganisms in compost provide immediate food sources for worms, while the improved soil structure beneath encourages deeper tunneling. I typically apply a 1/4-inch layer of compost directly on the soil surface, then add my chosen mulch on top. This technique has dramatically increased earthworm populations in all my growing areas. The way you apply mulch matters just as much as what type you choose. I always start with soil that's already moist. Never mulch over dry soil. The mulch thickness should be 2 to 4 inches for most materials, keeping it pulled back slightly from plant stems to prevent pest issues and crown rot. One mistake I see constantly is applying mulch too thickly. More isn't always better. A 6-inch layer of mulch might seem generous, but it can create anaerobic conditions that actually repel earthworms. I'd rather see you apply 3 inches and refresh it as needed than dump on a thick layer that creates problems. Timing your mulch application also impacts earthworm activity. I prefer late spring application when the soil has warmed, but before the summer heat sets in. This gives worms time to establish in their new habitat before weather extremes hit. Your mulch strategy should evolve with the seasons. In spring, I focus on materials that break down quickly to feed rapidly reproducing worm populations. Summer calls for mulches that provide maximum cooling and moisture retention. Fall is perfect for applying longer-lasting materials like shredded leaves that will feed worms through winter. Even in winter, earthworm activity continues in milder climates, so maintaining some mulch coverage keeps your soil biology active year-round. I've learned to view mulching not as a once-per-season chore, but as an ongoing conversation with the soil life in my garden. Creating worm-friendly mulch systems has been one of the most rewarding aspects of my gardening journey. Watching soil transform from lifeless growing medium to vibrant living earth filled with beneficial organisms never gets old. The plants growing in these conditions show the difference immediately: stronger growth, better disease resistance, and flavors that make you remember why you started gardening in the first place. Remember, every garden is unique, so don't be afraid to experiment with different combinations and techniques. Start with 1 or 2 mulch types, observe how your earthworms respond, and adjust from there. The soil life will guide you toward what works best in your specific conditions. If this deep dive into worm-friendly mulching has sparked your curiosity about soil biology and natural gardening methods, make sure to subscribe to Soil Sage Chronicles for more in-depth explorations of the living world beneath our feet. Share this article with fellow gardeners who are ready to discover the underground secret to gardening success. Your earthworms are waiting to get to work.